Which dairy animal is best for your homestead? A cow or a goat? Today we're going to be talking about just that. I'm going to share my experiences with having both kinds of dairy animals on our small 2-acre homestead. If we haven't met before, hi, I'm Sarah from the Nest in the West. I live on a small homestead in Phoenix, Arizona with my husband and our 4 children. I'm a homeschool mom, a small-scale flower farmer, and I teach homesteaders the art of making beautiful wheels of goat milk cheese, as well as holistic dairy goat care in my online courses and membership. If you are getting ready to hop on the homestead dairy train, you're probably wondering to yourself, which dairy animal is best for me? And that's a really great place to start because in all honesty, I do not believe there is one superior dairy animal. I feel that so much depends on your context, your goals, and your farm. Both goats and cows and sheep, for all you sheep dairy people out there, can bring so much to the table on the homestead. The real question is, what are your family's goals and needs? How much milk are you looking to produce? How much land do you have? And what is that land suitable for? I'm going to start by sharing just a little bit of my backstory. So we got started homesteading nearly 9 years ago, and I was so excited about the idea of finally having homestead dairy that we jumped right in and bought 2 Jersey standard cows. They were beautiful. It was such an extreme learning curve and crazy experience owning them because I'd never owned an animal bigger than a dog. We had them bred, they both gave birth at the same time, and suddenly we were in the thick of having to milk 2 full-grown cows. Pretty quickly, I realized that one of the cows was actually a heifer. She really had not been trained to milk, and so we sold her to a micro dairy nearby. And for the next few years, we continued to milk the other cow, Maudie. She gave us a few calves, she raised our beef, she raised homestead milkers that we could sell, and she really provided a lot for our family, and I'm grateful for her. Meanwhile, right after we had purchased our cows and were waiting to get them bred, we realized that we were not going to have milk for another 10 months at the least. And so we went out and purchased a small little dairy goat. Her name is Ginny. She's still my best girl today. She's still here on our farm producing milk, and she is just lovely. And so she kept us in milk while we were waiting for the cows to calve. And that was a great introduction to milking at all. And I know a lot of people start this way. People tend to think of goats as a beginner dairy goat animal or a starter animal before you take the leap to cows. And while I think goats can absolutely serve that purpose and be a really great option, especially if you're a beginner, they certainly do not end there. I think goats are a standalone dairy animal. We actually ended up switching from cows to exclusively dairy goats about 4 or 5 years after getting our cows, and I haven't looked back. Goats have been the perfect dairy animal for our family and our homestead. So after we started milking our cows, we pretty quickly realized that one of our children, and then later on when we had another baby, 2 of our children could not actually consume that cow milk without digestive problems. So even though it was amazing raw cow milk dairy, they just couldn't do it. But they thrived on the goat milk. It pretty quickly became comical how much effort I was putting into making dairy products for our family because I had to make 2 of everything to make sure everyone could enjoy our own homemade dairy products. I was making something with cow milk and something with goat milk cheese, cow milk butter, goat milk, sour cream, all the different things. At the same time, we were starting to realize how expensive it was going to be to continue to feed our 1 cow. We have about an acre of pasture and we live in the desert. It's not the greatest pasture and hay is very expensive. We were having to feed our cow hay year round and she needed a lot of it. Grain too was something that she needed so much more of than I could actually afford to feed. We don't live in big ag country. There are no grain mills nearby. It's not an easy thing to get quality feed materials for something as big as a dairy cow where I live. We also had a few experiences that made me feel like having more than 1 dairy animal was actually going to be the wisest choice for us. So in 2021, we sold the last few dairy cows that we had and we switched entirely to dairy goats. Now we have a herd that fluctuates between 12 and 25 depending on how many babies are born and who we're keeping that year, and I'm milking 5 does this year. Switching was bittersweet and it wasn't an easy choice, but it was 100% the right choice for our farm and our family. So I'm going to go over the top things right now that made us decide to switch to dairy goats from dairy cows. These are the things that I feel goats excel at when it comes to homestead dairy, but that doesn't mean that I think that goats are necessarily the right choice for you. But they might be. Like I said before, cows and goats both bring so much to the table. But hopefully this helps you make the right decision for you and your homestead. Okay, first of all, I like not having all of my eggs in one basket. So when you are a family or a smaller homestead keeping dairy animals, you are likely not going to have more than 1 or 2 cows because they produce a lot of milk and they take a lot of feed. For us, it was only economical and maintenance-wise only made sense for us to keep 1 cow in milk. And when something happened to her, that was all the milk that I had down the drain. She got really bad pneumonia one year, and we had to give her pretty strong antibiotics to get her back to full health, and I ended up having to dump milk for 8 weeks. Thankfully, we had our little goat in milk, and so I was able to get a little bit of milk from her, but she was pretty close to drying off at that point. And it really brought to my attention the beauty of having a herd of animals and multiple dairy animals at a time. So if something goes wrong, if a goat or a cow gets sick or, God forbid someone dies, at least you have backup animals. So right now I'm milking 5 does, and if something happens to one of them, either her production tanks, she gets sick, something really bad happens, I still have 4 other animals that I can milk and still get a good deal of milk for my family. And this isn't really on my list, but I do love just the personalities of having more than 1 dairy animal. It's really fun to have a herd, have different genetic lines, have different personalities, and it brings a lot of strength to the homestead to have multiple animals versus relying on just 1 or 2. I also love the size of my goats. Even with the largest breed of goats, they are so much more manageable than a standard size dairy cow. Oh my goodness, we had multiple times where our cow either needed to be corralled for some procedure or another, or I had a vet out who needed to take a look at her, and she was stressed by the situation, and she would run away, and I quickly realized, you have to be a cowboy to catch a cow. If she doesn't want to come, there's literally nothing I can do to make her come. And thankfully our vets were cowboys, and so they were wonderful. They could rope her, they could get her to do what they needed. But me, myself, alone on my homestead, I was powerless to actually wrangle my cow and make her do anything. And the same is just not true of my goats. I can handle them small enough that even if they're ornery or upset or in pain, I can get them to where I need them to go to take care of them. They're also a really great size for children to be around. When we had cows, my young children were not allowed out in the barn or pasture without me because I was concerned for their safety. Even though our cow was really sweet and pretty docile, she's a huge animal and she would fling her head around or, step without looking where she was going, and she could really easily have hurt one of my small children. Goats, on the other hand, are so much easier for children to be around and handle. I love that my kids can run and play in the pasture or play in the barn, and while we're always mindful of animals and the fact that we're not controlling them, they need to be respected and we give them space, my kids can handle them and be around them no problem. Another thing that I really love about keeping goats versus cows is that I feel comfortable keeping bucks on my homestead. With my cow, I never felt comfortable keeping a bull. Our homestead was small, we had small children, and a bull was not something I wanted to handle, let alone have somewhere on my property with the potential to get out and have to fence him in. My bucks are easy to handle. I can pretty much handle them on my own. My husband does help with them quite a bit, but I can keep multiple bucks on my property, have multiple breeding lines, and do it pretty simply in a rather small space and keep all of my breeding in-house. I love that about goats. I love that I don't have to outsource and get an AI tech out here or rent a buck or, bring my goats somewhere anywhere else, I have the capacity to keep all of my breeding in-house because they're smaller dairy animals and I feel confident and comfortable keeping males on my property. Another benefit to keeping goats versus cows is that goats tend to give birth to multiple kids. So if something went wrong and, the baby doesn't make it at birth or is stillborn or something happens, that is all of your beef or your next dairy animal when you're keeping cows, because they tend to just have one calf. But goats have multiple, and so even if you lose one, you often have others to take their place. Multiple kids also means more money if you are selling the babies. So this year we had 9 doelings born on our homestead. And if you're selling them for $500, $600 each, that's a lot of potential cash that can be brought into the homestead. And that's a lot of beautiful milkers that you can send out to other homesteads or keep for yourself. All right, let's talk about feed, because feeding dairy goats is so much easier and less expensive than feeding cows for me. This completely depends on your setup and your homestead. If you have acres and acres of beautiful grass pasture, feeding cows might be a really easy, inexpensive thing for you. But for me, on small acreage, it really was so much more economical to be feeding dairy goats. Goats are really efficient, especially the breed that I keep, mini Nubians, are really efficient at turning their feed into milk. And so they don't take a whole lot of input to get good output. I can feed my entire herd of goats, bucks and babies included, for less money than I was feeding my dairy cow. And even when it comes to the milk, my family actually prefers the goat milk to the cow milk. When we had both goats and cows, I actually drank the goat milk a lot more than I drank the cow milk. The cow milk I used for making cheese. The goat milk was our regular drinking milk because I love the sweet, creamy flavor. Now, you want to make sure that you're handling your milk really well, and I do have a video about this that I can link up here, but goat milk can absolutely be just as sweet, creamy, and delicious as cow milk, if not more so. We also still make all of our dairy products with our goat milk. I don't make butter. You can make goat milk butter though, so if that's important to you, you can totally get a cream separator and make your own butter. For me, I just feel like with the time constraints I have, I am more than happy to buy excellent quality butter from the store and just use all of the milk for making all of our yogurt, cheese, kefir, all the great dairy products that we love, we make from our very own goat milk. Another thing we really love about raising dairy goats versus cows is that we can easily raise the male offspring born every year for meat, and we can butcher them ourselves on our own homestead without having to call in a butcher with heavy equipment. Because cows are a smaller ruminant, it is pretty easy to butcher them, harvest their meat at home on your own. Even without having ever butchered an animal before, we were able to figure it out a few years ago, and so we've done so every year since, and the meat is delicious. It really does taste almost indistinguishable from beef. I would say it's kind of a cross between beef and lamb, but heavy on the beef side. It's a really delicious, healthy, lean red meat, and we absolutely love it. Okay, so how do you determine which dairy animal is right for you on your homestead? I think first and foremost, you need to take a hard look at your farm and see what resources are available to you. What is your pasture like? What kind of setup do you have for animals? Goats are harder to fence in than cows. So if you have acres and acres of amazing pasture and they're just able to be fenced by a couple hot wires, cows might be a way better option for you. Also take a look at what feed costs are in your region. Is it going to be economical for you to feed a large animal like a cow or smaller animals like a goat? Do you have a lot of brush that needs clearing or brambles and shrubs on your property? In that case, goats might be a really great option because they can not only help you clear those things, but they can also eat those things and turn that into milk. What is your confidence level when it comes to keeping animals? Are you capable of keeping a very large animal and handling it? You can certainly dive in feet first and just learn as you go. That's what we did, and I don't regret it, but I also don't think it was the wisest decision for us. What kind of animals do you have available to you in your region? Do you have quality goats or quality cows and breeders nearby that you could source high quality animals from? How much milk are you hoping to get from your animal? And are you okay with having more than one? And lastly, think about your family's needs. Maybe try some raw cow or raw goat milk if you haven't already. Make sure your family can enjoy the milk from the animal you're hoping to get. No matter what, goats, cows, and sheep are all amazing dairy options for the homestead, and each one brings so much to the table, from milk and dairy products to meat to manure for the gardens. There's so much that they bring to the table. And I'm really passionate about sharing what an amazing, wonderful option a goat can be. They really are just as serious of a dairy animal for the homestead as a cow. Enough so that yes, even after years of owning dairy cows, I switched to goats. If you found this video helpful, I would love for you to stick around, like and subscribe, and help my channel to grow. I put out videos about holistic dairy goat care and cheese making every single week. And if you want to go further and get more support in your dairy goat journey, check out my membership, the Dairy Goat Collective. Inside, we have a vibrant community feed, weekly private podcast episodes, monthly live Zoom chats, and an ever-growing library of resources and courses. I'm cheering you on in your goat journey, and I'll see you in the next video.